All right, I think we're live now. Let's see if this works. It's been a long time. Let me know if anyone can see or hear me. Let's see. How's the sound? Can you guys hear me okay if anyone's here? Hey Bondo, hey Reed, Zang Zag, Z and Z. How's it going, guys? Can you hear me okay? Sounds good, Bondo. I wasn't sure if my my mic was working or not, so glad you guys can hear me. That was my immediate concern. Hope everyone's been well. Ice the BB, Elo, Deesh Thinkin, Timmy McGee, Shug Nasty, Brendan Morrow, hello. Yeah, I think it's been maybe 3 years since I've been on YouTube. So it's been a long hiatus. So I was curious to see if how the YouTube algorithm works and if it still sends this out to some people who maybe used to watch my channel and that I used to hang out with and talk to. Yeah, so my plan was really just to maybe give some updates on kind of what I've been up to for those who are interested. My plan for probably coming back on this channel and starting to make some videos here and there, because I miss just kind of talking to Pokemon with new people and with kind of a broader audience, and not just on the Patreon, or like with my coworkers. So talk a little bit about who I am, I guess introduce myself a little bit to those who don't know me, who are on YouTube, who are now watching YouTube Pokemon stuff. So my name's Jake. This channel is called Pokenomics. My camera is very high. I don't know if it looks weird if I'm looking down, but do my best here. Yeah, so my channel is called Pokenomics. I started this channel 6 years ago, probably 7 years ago now. And the point of this channel was to talk about investing and collecting Pokemon cards, and how I wanted to collect cards, but collect cards in like a financially thoughtful way, hoping to one day, have a considerably valuable collection that had gone up in value. And if I was gonna, I guess the feeling was like, if I'm gonna spend a lot of money on these items, I want them to be valuable so that I can potentially resell them or use them to support something else in my life. It would be pretty painful putting lots and lots of money into something and then not being able to sell it for anything. It would definitely make this this hobby pretty rough if that was the case. And so my theory back in like 2017, 2018, when I first started making videos like 2019. But when I was thinking about coming on here, and back when I was like on the old E4, for anyone who knows what E4 is, my like collecting investing theory was, and this is probably something a lot of you guys have heard a lot on YouTube in general, or people talking about in general, but back then my theory was that 30-year-olds like to collect what they had when they were 10. That Pokemon card collecting was like one of the biggest hobbies, if not the biggest phenomenon hobby, maybe outside of sports card collecting, with kind of Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic being a little bit less popular when I was a kid. And my theory was, well, a bunch of 30-year-olds are probably going to want to reminisce and recollect some of the stuff that they had when they were kids, or some of the stuff that they couldn't afford and couldn't get. And I didn't, that wasn't on my own theory. It was a theory I had read about investing in pop culture collectibles. And so I looked up Pokemon, because I hadn't thought about Pokemon from the time I was probably well, gosh, how old was I when I was doing Pokemon cards when I was a kid? I don't know, 10 maybe? 9, 10, 8, probably like 8 to 10. And I hadn't looked at a Pokemon card till I was like the age 28. So from 8 to 28. Um, yeah, if people have questions and they want to get to after I go through this spiel, I'll definitely answer them. Um, yeah, so my theory was that that um, basically that well, I did some research and I saw that Pokemon was the largest pop culture franchise in the world, even at that time. This, in my opinion, was such a large collecting category. And when I looked up the pop reports, the PSA population reports at that time, and the amount of money it would cost to buy out a lot of the biggest cards in the hobby, I was surprised at how cheap it was. And so what I did is I took quite a bit of money. A lot of I was a single guy at that time, and I put a lot of money. This was like 2018, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and I bought up 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 copies of lots of like PSA 10 first editions, gold stars, Masaki cards I really liked, a few trophy cards, Worlds promos I really liked, um, and basically just got really lucky. And part of it was definitely like hard work and tracking these things down and trying to buy them at good prices, and part of it was sort of the theory that ended up seeming to be correct, right? But got very lucky and had this really, quite a lot of money basically from all of that to play with. And so since then, I've started a few different businesses in the Pokemon space. I have a streaming team. Like I run work with a team of streamers, physical store locations, eBay businesses, Patreon and consulting businesses. Yeah, and so I'm busier now than ever, way busier now than ever in Pokemon. For those who don't know, but I just don't make public YouTube videos anymore and talk about the market like I used to. But I do kind of miss doing it, so I probably will come back and do it a little bit more. So since I've been on YouTube, I guess the last part of that story is I still have my collection is as big as it's ever been, and while I've been selling some things the entire time and flipping and building a business, my other goal is to build on my collection the whole time and to never sell, to have this collection forever, ideally. And then use the profits and the progress I make financially in the hobby to continue to grow my collection. And so I've managed to do that. I've managed to keep those items and continue to build. And obviously with the surprising prices that the vintage market has hit, this year, though although those items are becoming more and more valuable, I try and sort of just kind of keep those aside, keep those in the long-term collection as much as I possibly can. Occasionally I'll sell, a copy of something, but mostly just keeping, and the long term. Now I have enough. I was able to sell enough over the years and flip enough and start enough businesses that now I had enough capital to kind of run all the other businesses, which then made enough capital for me to continue to collect and do other things in the hobby. So, but yeah, so other than like Pokemon stuff, and the businesses that I've been running or helping to build, I got married, bought a house, and having my first kid. So those are the other big life things. So it's been a really busy 2.5 years, starting all these businesses, taking that next step with my wife, and but it's a very good, productive, busy, definitely crazy. I hope everyone here's been well who's watching this, and I definitely recognize a lot of these names from when I did YouTube in the past. So I'm hoping all of you guys are doing well in your lives and well in sort of your Pokemon card journeys. Feel free to share with me, what you're up to, what you've been up to, how things are going. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm happy to be back. Happy to answer questions, talk about like discuss topics in the hobby, discuss topics about Pokemon business. Happy to be sort of an open book. Um, well, not a completely open book, but somewhat of an open book about the joke was always, not quite as open book as Dan is. Dan Ketchum Collectibles, my Patreon partner, but uh, pretty open book. All right, so let's see what people are asking and saying. So first question here is from Reed Armour. Jake, how long can this possibly last? Are we in a bubble? A bubble can last for a decade. Surely the top must be close. Yeah, so, I think I made videos on this in the past, kind of early on my channel. There are different stages of a bubble. Bubbles, just because a bubble is happening doesn't mean the underlying asset or the underlying market is going to go to zero and doesn't have any value, these types of things. I think in this current market, you see, some of that irrational exuberance that you're going to see in bubbles in some parts of the market, in some items. In the whole hobby in general, there's been some amount of irrational exuberance, over a pretty long period of time. All of that's very similar to 80s and 90s comic book collecting in sports. And we see how, sports cards today, the top of that hobby is way higher now, even after, a fairly large bubble and burst in the 80s and 90s. So even if we do see something like that, which I think there's some decent chance that we're in sort of a 10, 12-year boom period with multiple different kind of bubbles. And, maybe we're in one now again, with some items, maybe not others. It doesn't mean that my thesis has always been more of that 20, 30, 40-year thesis on own the things that the multi-hundred millionaires and billionaires are going to want in 20 to 30 years. My goal is to own those items. If I'm going to invest seriously, speculate seriously in this hobby, it's to try to own those items, try and find those items, try and learn about those items and collect them. To be fair, it's also what I enjoy collecting. But to your question, like, a bubble can last for a decade, absolutely. Surely the top must be close. This could be the last round of a bubble before a longer, calmer period, or we could have another one in a couple of years. It's why if you don't have a plan for what you're doing with your items, it can be impossible to navigate. When do you buy? When do you sell? So many people, sold a lot in 2020, right before the crash, right, of a lot of vintage items, and it was great timing. And if they had sold the items then and then bought them back over the last few years, and now are selling them again, and then maybe buy them back in 2 to 3 years from now, like, they may make a lot of money. They may time everything correctly. But how many people can do that? How do you actually time things correctly? And aren't you likely to do the opposite? Or someone's got to do the opposite in order for you to be making those moves. There's got to be someone who's buying and selling from you, both at the top and the bottom. So I just think it's really tricky to speculate that way and try and time things. So it's better to have, general sort of theories and plans on how you're gonna, value invest or buy, grow your collection over a long period of time, being patient, trying to buy things that you feel like are relatively undervalued relative to other items and/or, relative to other times in the hobby. I think in these markets, it becomes really important to buy, if you're going to be investing or speculating in anything, that you're really focusing on stuff that you feel like is very undervalued relative to other stuff. In a market where everything feels flat or down, or there's irrational pessimism, there are often lots of buying opportunities or buying options, but people won't buy any of it because it's down and it feels like it may be down forever. And in some cases, things won't be down forever, but things may be down for a long time, and you could have money sitting in items for many years. So those are all the challenges of decision making. And I've never been a believer in much of a believer in short term, um, you know, day trading in anything. I think being a momentum sort of short term day trader investor um, can work great if you have insider information, and can work great if you're an influencer and you're creating sort of your own market. But I think it's very hard to do it if you have neither of those things. Jake, are you a billionaire now? No, I'm not a pokey billionaire yet. Not yet. Shag Next said, I remember you discussing risk a lot last time you were on YouTube. Has your risk tolerance increased over the last few years, given the hobby's growth? A lot has changed in the last 5 years. So I'd say, like, my personal, the amount that I can risk now has increased because I have more money to risk. But my, like, general, the way that I make decisions based on like the percentages in which I'm willing to risk. Like, one thing I try and do is I look at my collection. Obviously, I look at my collection very differently than I look at my inventory for my businesses. My businesses have quite a bit of inventory across the, two of my businesses have most of the inventory. And in both of those businesses, there's a lot of inventory, and that inventory I am looking to constantly flip and resell and move as quickly as possible. I'm buying high or buying low, excuse me, and selling that inventory higher in a variety of different ways. With my collection, I like to be able to afford my collection, is something I used to say a lot on YouTube. And what that meant is just personally feeling like I had enough stocks, enough money in a house, enough money in my businesses that were actively making more money, enough income that I felt comfortable enough to hold my collection, to have a lot of money in my collection. So I wouldn't say that, like, my risk tolerance, or I think I've always had a really high risk tolerance. I think relative to, like, my friends and family, I've always been a little bit more of the entrepreneur, a little bit more of the, I really like and embrace what I view as, like, educated asymmetric risk opportunities. So seeing that, yes, I'm putting a lot of money at risk constantly, but there's an asymmetric risk reward, i.e. that, I mathematically, if I'm assessing it correctly, have much more of an opportunity, or much more likely to make money than lose money. That's how I felt about Pokemon when I got into it, when I was buying all of those really high-end cards in mass. And that's how I feel now with my businesses in the space. And that's how I feel now with my collection, even though certainly, like, the asymmetric risk of my collection is not nearly as good. I would say, I think it's more likely that the prices of some of these cards get to where I hoped they would get. For example, like, there are cards that might be 100,000 now, and I was hoping one day they would get to, like, $1 million or 1.5 million or 2 million. I think it's far more likely they'll eventually get there because of how much they've come up in the last 5 years and how many people are interested in Pokemon. So I think the risk is, I think there's a lower risk. I think there's a better chance that, but now the price to actually buy into them is so much higher right now that, when I bought some of them, not all of them, I've been buying cards the whole time, but when I bought some of them, back when almost nobody was interested in them, cards that are going for 100,000 that you could buy for $500, $200, $600, these types of things. The asymmetric risk, you could take $10,000 and own almost the entire population back then. Now if you wanted to try to corner the market on some really high-end card, it's going to cost you many millions of dollars. And I think the even with the upside being more likely to happen, the upside doesn't, like, mathematically justify the increase in price. As good as it did back in 2018, 2019. However, it doesn't mean that it still isn't a decent investment if you can afford it. And to your question, if you can tolerate the risk based on the fact that there is a fairly large chance that it will go down or not go up, if you're able to tolerate that. Which you have to if you're in pop culture collectibles. You have to be able to tolerate a lot of volatility, a lot of ups and downs, particularly while that market is hot. Appreciate that, Poke Slam. That's very kind. Nice to see you're continuing to be here and doing Pokemon. It's nice to see some familiar names, just that people are like still enjoying Pokemon and doing content and, you know, having fun. Appreciate that, Gump Brave. Talking about me. Hopefully good things. Where have I been? I've been good, man. I've been getting married and starting businesses and buying a house and on the way to having my first kid and just busy. Where's my dream place to live? Oh, my dream place to live. I don't know. I'm not a big. I like being around. Like I like my stuff, and I like feeling comfortable. I like it being pretty quiet, and I like but honestly, just like having friends and community is probably the most important thing. I like having my like basketball, the group that I play basketball with 3 times a week. I like my routine. So like any place where I can have build a decent routine, which is really in most places. Hyfix says there's some cards with pop reports of 200 that are easy to find sales history or active listing, and some vintage boxes are near possible to find listings of. Is the Skyridge box sub 100 pop? So I have no idea. I definitely, it's an interesting question. I used to get this question back in the day. What are your estimates on some of these vintage boxes? Skyridge in particular, like I don't see them around anymore. Back when I used to get asked this question, I would say there's probably 30,000 plus base, unlimited boxes left. And I know of thousands, I know of people with cases and cases and cases. Now, a lot of those cases have been opened and broken down over the last 6-8 years, or boxes have been sold off. There's still a lot of those. Now, how many Skyridge boxes? I would guess it's quite a bit more than 100 are left. But if it were 200 or 400 or 500 or 50, it wouldn't stun me. None of those numbers would stun me. I think to have 100 of that box left would be very, very little, but it is possible that it's 100 or less. It absolutely is. And I really don't have any insight into that. I don't personally own one. A little cluttered in there, definitely cluttered. Still kind of moving. This has become the storage room in many ways. The rest of our house is like perfectly clean, I promise. My wife is very high cleaning standards, and this has become sort of the room that just like we toss some stuff in, mostly my stuff, to be fair to her. Brandon Morris says, I've not put any money into my collection since 2020, using only profits and a lot of patient spare time. I finished base jungle fossil, only 2 cards to finish rocket. That's awesome. Congratulations. I'm sure that feels good. I think having patience and kind of making progress is a big part of what I enjoy, hunting for a good deal or for the right card, the right quality of card. That's awesome. Collecting is extremely fun. Very rewarding, I think. Congrats on the wife and kids. Appreciate that. Hey, Jake, love that you're back. Appreciate you. How do you feel about the overall landscape of grading and the price discrepancies between PSA and other grading companies, with PSA commanding huge premiums? How do I feel about that? There's a lot to say about the grading card market at the moment. So I think some companies, they're like a pretty large percentage of their business is coming from streamers, repackers, things like that. Pretty much every company outside of PSA and maybe Beckett, I would say, a pretty large percentage of what they're doing is the prices have to be fairly affordable, or people won't be masquerading with them anymore because it doesn't make sense for their repack or streaming or whatever business they're doing. PSA is in a bit of a different situation where they command such premiums outside of like the Black Label or Pristine 10 or even the Pristine CGC 10. I think CGC tends not to do as well as PSA for the most part, particularly on key cards. I mean, I've even been seeing that on Ultra Modern on some cards, which has been interesting. Yeah, it just, I think collectors, I think people who've been doing this a long time, I know myself, most of us started with PSA and prefer PSA for the continuity. Collecting is not totally rational. And a lot of it is when you start doing something, you sort of continue to do it. You continue to get comfortable. That being said, I think all the grading companies have had their warts. I think there are reasons. I grade with pretty much. I think I grade with 3 different companies. Different cards for different reasons. I'm happy to if you have any specific questions about specific companies or the drama stuff for the I don't like this grading company because they did this. I thought that I saw a lenticular card that people were talking about. That didn't seem like that big of a deal to me. I also think pricing cards in the secondary market is challenging, particularly in a market like this, because things are moving up so drastically that complaining about the comp that they've sent them, it's they're always going to try and pick a fairly low comp, and you should say no, that's not right. I think this higher comp, etc. But I don't know how that one settled out, but that didn't seem that bad. I think I won't call out anyone specifically, but I'll just say broadly, the grading card companies, their first job is to authenticate. Okay. And companies that don't do a good job authenticating or have authenticated some cards that they should have not authenticated because they weren't real, that's definitely, to me, by far the most problematic thing. I think the grading scale is somewhat subjective, and it's why I always buy the card and the grade, not just the grade. And I've always collected that way. I've always tried to. I also enjoy collecting that way. So my PSA 10 graded collection or PSA 9 graded collection, I try to buy as many strong 10s, strong 9s as I can. But I also like the 10s and I also like the 9s. I want both. Hey Jake, what are your thoughts on? Yeah, but I'm happy to, if you have more specific questions, on that, I'm happy to talk more about it. Hi Jake, what are your thoughts on sealed video games or vinyl records as collectibles? I don't know too much about it. I just don't know. I don't know the markets well. I don't know the people well. I think that video games and vinyl records were, for the most part, unless they were first editions or first printings and or limited releases, they were not created to be collectibles, unlike cards. And so I've always felt it's interesting when things that are created to be collectible are collected versus things that weren't meant to be collectible initially and weren't really collectible, but then later in time become collectible. That doesn't mean that they can't become collectible. I just think that there can be a little bit of a higher ceiling of historic importance, and that it looks great, that people really care about it, that people really like it, because again, it was created to be played and listened to. It wasn't created to look cool, right? Now, some of them I think really do look cool, and I think some of them are very historic and cool, and I think they would make good collectibles personally. But that's something I would think about when buying, when starting to invest or speculate on pop culture non-collectibles or pop culture items that aren't collectibles now and maybe will become collectibles. We see a lot of that. In general, people talking, I see it on TikTok and YouTube and other places, people talking about, hey, this is a really undervalued, animation cells or manga or, records or video games or whatever. Some have been more fleshed out than others. I think some of this stuff is probably undervalued or underappreciated because people don't know about it, and so it getting some attention, then people want it. And then I think in other cases there's sort of artificial short-term kind of demand being created by individuals, and there isn't a deep collector interest and long-term collector pool for some things. So you just have to be careful, particularly when hobbies aren't fleshed out. You also don't know how much supply is out there, so there can be like short-term demand can drive up prices, but then once prices are high, now that drives out supply that had been sitting because there was no value. We've seen that in Pokemon cards and other pop culture cards, over the years. And I'd be careful in any, video games. I think is probably a bit more fleshed out. I think vinyl records of the Beatles and and 60s and 70s, and I imagine there have been collectors of those things for a long time. So I imagine those aren't like totally unfleshed out markets. I don't know too much about them, and I know video games was getting very popular at the same time Pokemon cards were sort of in 2019, 2020, 2021. Appreciate that. Hi, Fix. What is your hypothesis on why so much of modern Pokemon does so well? So I think it's the newest, hottest, most accessible, items. It's the items that are going to get the most content around, the most attention. Influencers, people who are looking to make videos and talk about the next thing are always going to be talking about whatever is the new modern Pokemon. Of course, what is modern, modern or ultra modern, is that just what's, people are talking about now? What people are talking about right now is very different than the sets and what people were talking about 3 years ago. Items that are very expensive now or have gone up a lot in the last year and a half in modern are different items than went up a lot, 3 years ago. There are items that, have really not moved up a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, where you have vintage items that have 20x, and you have ultra modern new items that have come out, new sets that hadn't yet been released that are selling for 3-4 times MSRP, right? Nearly out of the gate. Very hard to predict, I think, all of the volatility around the ultra modern and around the, if we want to call it, like, I don't know what you want to call Sword and Shield, now, for example, and even some early Scarlet and Violet and certainly into Sun and Moon, when is that going to start getting into middle era? I don't know, based on, what the terminology is these days, how people are talking about it. But, and Pokemon is actively printing a ton of it. So a ton of it is coming into the system, and Pokemon has an incentive to sell it, right? So they're promoting it, they're putting it through distributors that then have incentives to sell it, which promotes and advertises the cards and the art, and they use influencers to promote it. And, there's a lot of energy there, and people like, we all like new. I like new sets. I'm excited to see what new cards are coming out, what new sets are coming out, etc. Certainly my streaming, our streaming channel, we get to see, and are excited to open new products and new sets with people and enjoy the fun of all of it. I appreciate that. Definitely enjoy talking to Zach and Charlie, and still consider them both friends and talk to them both pretty regularly. Let's see. Chimera Q. Yeah, and for those who don't know me and are just kind of jumping in, feel free to ask questions. We're just kind of hanging out. Happy to talk Pokemon collecting, Pokemon speculating, investing, Pokemon card business, any and everything. Chimera Q says, I'm at a crossroads on if I should finish collecting certain sets before they get too expensive, or waiting until the market corrects later in the year. Yeah, I think when things are moving up a lot, if you're talking specifically about, let's say, most middle era stuff and some WotC stuff, my answer might be slightly different than a set that like has just come out. But the real answer is like there's going to be a lot of speculating and guessing, and getting it exactly right is going to be unlikely. So try to like, my honest advice would be like, try not to let it ruin your fun and your good time. Trying to get it perfect, and maybe try and come up with a bit of a plan or a strategy beforehand, and then kind of follow through with it, rather than trying to time everything perfectly as it goes. But because I don't know which sets you're looking at exactly, I would say that, yeah, when volatility, when things are really moving up quickly, obviously, they have more of a chance, at least in the short run, to continue to be volatile. When a lot of energy and movement goes into something, it now has a greater chance of like doubling again and or halving. And that may make certain people uncomfortable, and certain people say, hey, I'm not going to buy it at all. I'm just going to wait for it to, even if I have to buy it at 2 times the price, or 3 times the price, I'm just going to wait for it to find a sort of steady price point that I can feel better at, because I also don't want to buy it and then it halve in price. And I think if you're buying in this environment, you are taking somewhat of an increased risk that in a month from now or 2 months from now, whatever you're buying is going to be twice as expensive, and you'll feel good about that maybe, or half as much and you'll feel, stressed out about that. And it's interesting. Different people have different personalities, and some people, they love sort of buying into that, now that it's going up, now it seems cool and I really want it. And, or there's just the sort of fear of missing out, right? I think the fear of missing out stuff is usually almost always not objectively true, or in many cases like a little over, the emotions are a little bit short-term thinking and irrational, because the reality is like probably most of these items would be affordable for you in the long run if you kind of save and make a plan for them, and or sell some other items. Obviously there are some items that are crazy expensive and take lots of planning and you may never get. And what I always say, and this isn't just directed at you, Chimera, this is just like in general, what I always say is like, they're just cards. Like, I'm one of the biggest collectors in the world. Like, I'm one of the craziest people in the world around this stuff, right? And I can say wholeheartedly, they're just cards. Like, don't let it get you too stressed out, too down. Try to enjoy yourself. My strategy on that, Chimera, has been to set long-term goals of many, many years. And I try and make one good decision after the next. I try and say, hey, I think this item's a little bit relatively undervalued, or I think that set's going to continue to go for a while. It seems like it has a lot of momentum. Let me buy that, or let me not buy that now, or let me wait, or look, all the attention's gone over here, and now people think this isn't investable or collectible anymore. I still think it is. Now I'm going to buy it, right? You want to try and do that stuff as much as you can. But in the long run, you're just trying to make like pretty good decisions, and lots and lots and lots of them over long periods of time. And you'll find that you're doing well, that you're happy with sort of your overall choices. I was talking in the Patreon this week, in office hours, and one thing I said to one of my, really has become a friend in there. I said to him, like, I've lost like endless amounts of money, like, that I could have made if I knew everything that was going to happen in this all the time, right? And so if you start thinking about the money you've lost because you should have bought that, and you should have bought that, and you should have bought more of that, and you should have tripled and quadrupled down on your instinct, or you should have not, whatever it is, right? That's always going to be natural thinking during these boom periods, because you always should have bought more. My dad is a financial advisor that has been for 40 years now, and runs his own business. And so one thing he is always saying to clients, like, you're always going to feel in bad times like you should panic and sell everything, and in good times that you should have bought more, and you knew it all along and you should have bought more. So just kind of understanding the making money is not enjoyable for the most part in investing. Making money is sort of stressful, and you always think you should have made more, when things are good, and you always, feel like the sky's falling when things are bad. And And that's why investing is not for the faint of heart. It's why most people hire financial advisors and professionals to do it for them. A lot of it isn't even just the like intellectual rigor of it. It's the emotional kind of stress and weight that goes with it. I think people expect investing and investing over long periods of time to be like very fun and very uplifting, and the it can be if you like the challenge and you like the grit and you like the struggle and you like the stress, and I think I do. There are parts of me that enjoy the challenge of all of that. But if you're expecting it to just be like fun and for you to just feel awesome and vibes, for it to just be like good vibes, it's not good vibes. I mean, things are going better for me than they have ever, right? And yet I feel like I'm on the verge of making the biggest mistakes ever, and I'm, having to calculate and take on more risk than I ever have. And, but it's in its own way, it's enjoyable. But I try to tell people that, if your vibes are not high, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You're probably, and I say this to this one guy I talk a lot of Discord about, just because, like, maybe he's a little worries and has a lot of money in this, and has seen cards go from $1,000 to $25,000, and it's like, you're supposed to feel, it's healthy to feel, what do I do with this? And I've been concerned by that, how do I manage that? That's healthy. Let's see. What are your thoughts? Oh, I might have skipped a question. Appreciate all the kind words, guys. Tim says, what are your thoughts on Pokemon Center ETBs, Ascend Heroes? ETBs are already at 500. So as a business, I don't love them because they're a bit expensive. They're a little bit harder to sell for us, and they sit on shelves a little bit longer. That being said, everything has been selling. As like an investor or speculator, what do I think about the price point on them? It's just not, I am not a collector for these things at those price points. All I can say is me, at like the way that I like to collect, my long-term collecting habits, I would own one of a lot of those items probably in the end. I'm not interested in cases or investing in multiple copies of all of these things personally. And if I were, I would probably have a short-term horizon strategy where I'm going to buy new sets that I think are underrated at the moment, and I'm going to put some money into them. And then 2 years later, when I think hopefully they'll be properly rated, I'm going to sell. And if you had been doing that the last 4 years and you had picked correctly, which is very difficult, in hindsight, it's easy to be like, oh, that was clearly the best set. Everyone loved that set. Not always easy to do beforehand. When you look at Scarlet and Violet, I think, like Obsidian and, a lot of those sets, like, no one really liked that much. I mean, I think Obsidian seemed to be like the hardest one to get. Anyway, I don't need to go too much into the details there, but very hard to predict like which packs were going to be $10 a pack and which packs were going to be $7. And, and of course the whole market is so strong that sort of everything has gone up, but some things have gone up, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times in value, and other things have gone up 20% in value, 25, 30% in value. And frankly, the market doesn't need to be this hot, doesn't need to be this great. And then you're probably going to see those items that have gone up 20, 30% actually would have gone down 20 or 30%. And the items that went up 2, 3, 4 times in value may have only gone up 20%. So that you'd run the risk of us going into an environment that's going to be more like the latter. But if you're buying smartly with the and you're predicting or you're engaged enough to know what the popular sets are, or what are underrated, and you and you actually sell, you actually buy and then buy at a price that hopefully isn't 2-3 times MSRP right away, and you sell, actually within a year or 2-year window before maybe that set becomes less relevant to people. I if someone was doing that in mass scale, they've certainly made a lot of money the last few years, and if they continue doing it, I would. There are people who I talk to, like in the Patreon, who are doing that, and I say, I think the asymmetric reward is like probably pretty good in their favor, continuing to be. It would cause me too much stress. It's a lot of storage, it's a lot of capital, and I just don't think it's at that point it's like I'd rather just start a flipping reselling business for the most part. Thoughts on the gold star boom in the last year? Yeah, so gold stars have definitely boomed. I mean, vintage in general, you're looking at 2 to literally 30 X's, like 30, we're talking about cards that were $2,000 selling for $140,000, right? $125,000. It's been an insanely massive boom. It's literally been similar to the boom in 2020, which the vintage boom in 2020 again, which is pretty wild. Now, on a percentage basis. Now, obviously, it's way bigger now. Like the market cap increase that's happened now is so much bigger than it was in 2020, even if on a percentage basis it's similar. It is different things. Like different things have done better this time around than the things that did the best last time. Like last time you had base set, be one of the absolute winners. This time, like base set Charizard PSA 10 first edition in particular has been like kind of a dud. It's a card that was 350,000 that's now like 500,000. Whereas if you bought a Gold Star Mew for $4,000, now it's PSA 10 or $5,000. Now that card's 150,000. Or like Expedition PSA 10s are selling for like over 100 grand. Some of them that you could have bought for 500 or $1,000 just 4 years ago. Maybe some of them you could have bought for 4,000 that are now over 100,000. Like some of the lower pop, maybe 12,000, 15,000 for like the extreme low pop Expedition PSA 10s. But now those are 120, 130, 140, 150,000. Yeah, it's interesting. On the other hand, like PSA 9s for that set are like, doing better, but I was kind of picking on that Charizard a little. Maybe that Charizard's really undervalued. If you should go ahead and buy PSA 10 first editions. I thought it was interesting. It was interesting that people reacted to like that Logan Paul PSA 10 first edition sale. Like, wow, that card sold for 950,000 when like, if the PSA 10 first edition Charizard only goes up from like 350,000 to 900 and some thousand, that's like way worse than like the majority of vintage cards and like middle era cards have done during this period on a percentage basis. To me, just kind of shows the lack of, it's like big headlines versus a lack of really knowing the price history. Ruben Chang says, thanks Jake. How do you feel about Chinese Pokemon cards, Chinese exclusive cards? There's some great arts. I worry about the importance of these cards in the long run. I would say like some of maybe the first ones, some of the like, well, there's the ones from the sets, which are fairly hard to pull, but then there's like the Mew or the ones that have come out, I guess, not just in Chinese, but in other languages as well. Some of the ones for different tournaments or different award cards. Some very cool arts, some very beautiful cards. I definitely think there's like vintage Japanese like promos and trophies and art cards from those eras that are way more undervalued than some of those. Personally, like I would go back to those. The fact that you can buy like a Fan Club Eevee for the same price as that Mew, like one card is just so much more historically significant to me as a collector and to the Pokemon hobby than the other. Now, in 20, 30 years, if we look back and we say, wow, that was like one of the first ever Chinese exclusive cards, and now they have all these Chinese exclusive cards, and China becomes the biggest or one of the biggest collectors of Pokemon in the world, maybe those Chinese cards are some of the biggest collectibles in the hobby. Like, you can come up with narratives why this is going to be huge versus that. A lot of this stuff is just so speculative. That's why I never say, I never guarantee, or I never say I definitely think that's going to happen, or definitely think that's going to happen, because it's so easy to come up with different narratives. Thoughts on modern sealed investing speculating, Rant, please. So I don't know, like, I'm not on YouTube. I don't know what the conversation is nowadays. I know a little bit of it from my Patreon and the conversations there. I see a lot of the same. I guess I'll repeat what I said before. I think if you are buying sets that you think, because of the last, now let's say 5 years of sort of price history, that's better than the 2 years of price history people were going off of 3 years ago. The sort of 5 years of price history, trying to predict what patterns are going to happen, and then trying to, like, momentum invest into it, and having a plan is, I'm going to buy this at this low price and then sell it in 2 years from now, I think could be reasonable depending on which direction you're going. But, like, did anybody expect, Destined Rivals, which I opened a lot of Destined Rivals. We opened a lot of Destined Rivals in our business and on our channel, and people liked it, but I didn't think people, like, loved it. That's the highest priced modern, like, ultra modern set of all time by far right now. Like, Evolving Skies, it took Evolving Skies a long time, and Evolving Skies is, like, considered, the set, right? Well, Destined Rivals is already, what is it up to, like 650 or 700, or I don't even know. It's very high, whatever it is. Someone here can probably tell me, but that's like unheard of. I remember when we as a hobby were shocked that Vivid Voltage hit like $250 a box. Now a set that nobody talks about, that nobody cares about. And if you had invested and speculated and said, well, Vivid Voltage is the best set of all time, I'm going to put a ton of money in Vivid Voltage at $250, $300 a box, like, that would have been one of the worst performing, Pokemon assets you probably could have put your money in over this time. In a major item, a big set item that you think would have done decently well if the hobby exploded. But it shows that it's just, like, it's really hard to predict. So if you're buying a lot of that Destined Rivals box thinking, okay, well, it's going to go to 2,400, is it going to be Evolving Skies 2.0, or is it going to be Vivid Voltage 2.0? I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I think it's a lot of my issue with it is in the past has really been about sort of the irrationality around it, and the guaranteeing and the claims about how it always goes up, and the not understanding that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, most sets you couldn't make money on, like on the secondary market, if you were a flipper or reseller at all. Zero, not even $5, right? So, obviously the market has dramatically changed. Hopefully it will continue to function and act like this, but the expectations now of, like, doubling your money, tripling your money, the expectations are so high now. It's really something. Hyfix says, currently struggling with being willing to overpay compared to recent sales for something quite rare that I feel is undervalued and is the only listing. Currently struggling with being willing to overpay. Yeah, that's a tough one. I certainly have had that thought many times. And I won't say too much. So I think it's a personal decision, but I think that's normal. And I think that, you should trust your gut one way or the other. And it's probably enough. If you're having a hard time making a decision and you're pretty experienced and engaged, it's probably a tough decision, which means it's probably not an obvious decision, which means both decisions are probably reasonably good. There's a lot of that in business, in life, when you get better and better at something, and it's hard to make a decision because you're pouring, you have a lot of data and both decisions seem like pretty good, or there's validity to both decisions. Like, yeah, it's probably because both decisions are pretty decent, and probably time to make a decision and then move to the next decision and move and move and move. And then when an obvious decision comes up, when an obvious moment comes up, that's when you really jump on it and really put a lot of money into it. That was like a Warren, something Warren Buffett talked a lot about, and Charlie Munger, who I really like. Just when you find those opportunities, when you're really studied in something and you're an expert in something and you're really positive, like if you spend most of your time like me, where you're like, I just don't know. There's a lot to analyze here. There's a lot, but every once in a while when you're like, wow, everything is just saying yes, like go all in. Yes. So this is a great question, Timmy. So I will preface this with saying that I have bought up a lot of Worlds promos during this boom. So, I can't go into it too much, but basically the largest private collector of these in the world sold his rather large collection in auction form, and it just pushed the prices down on them. But thankfully for people like me, it was a great opportunity to collect them and or buy up a bunch of them and buy up extra copies and these types of things. And actually what you're seeing now, Timmy, is that the prices have gone up a lot already. There's sales that have tripled, quadrupled on certain items. People are starting to buy them now and buy it now because they're not being auctioned anymore. There for a while there was tons of them being auctioned every week if you were engaged in that market. Very niche. The other part of it is it's just an incredibly niche small market. There's aren't a lot of people who ever talk about it, who know about it. I haven't been on YouTube in a long time, but I assume like people don't talk about it. Like people never talk about it. You never hear about it. Those cards and their rarity and their, in my opinion, coolness and historical importance. And the fact they have Pikachu and Psyduck and Eevee on so many of them. And, there are these incredibly, rare stamped cards that are legit trophy cards. It's a great example of how you need knowledge. If people don't have knowledge of something, if people don't know what it is, they're never going to buy it, of course. And even if they just see it once, they're going to be like, well, what is that? And unless it goes up a lot in price, or unless influencers who talk a lot, about cards like them, or, start talking about them, people just don't know about them, so they don't buy them. And, but that's cards like that. And some others are an example of like, even during periods like this, where I've seen value. There value in some Pokemon cards and some items that I think are, a lot rarer or a lot more historically important that haven't gone up or have even gone down, in value. And these are a perfect example of that. So what's up, Radar? Yeah, we're in 2017. Do you buy, sell, collect any other TCGs such as One Piece, Weiss Schwartz? What do I do? Let's see. Yeah, so we buy and sell One Piece. We don't do Weiss Schwartz. I do a little bit of Weiss Schwartz personally, and I've also I used to do it a little more before there were like some animes like Sword Art Online, and there are a couple of animes that I liked that I'm forgetting the other ones that and some Bandai stuff like One Piece, like before the One Piece now. I used to like some of the Bandai One Piece, the old stuff, because I just liked One Piece. So as like a collector, I collected a little bit of that stuff and a little bit of some Weiss Schwartz animes. But now that like you can get those animes in a lot more things, and obviously One Piece has this massively, successful new game. I've been doing Weiss Schwartz a little bit less, and just as a business, it's not the best seller. Whereas One Piece has been selling great and is very popular. Obviously, that's a very volatile market as well. But certainly there's a big, pretty big, fairly big player base and very large large collector base. AP Sports Car said, good to see you as well. It's been a long time. To phrase my question better, are you concerned with how much of your investments are tied to the market's trusted PSA's condition assessment? It's why I try and buy the card and the grade. So like because I think any collector will, any in the long run, if people are paying millions of dollars for single items that I have, they're gonna look at every little speck on the card, right? Like the more expensive these items get, the more important the card and the grade will be. But if you have an amazing card that graded a 9 that looks great, people are always going to wonder, well, what am I not seeing? And if I get it regraded, is it going to get crushed? Am I going to get a 9 again? I can't pay 10 value on a 9, right? So you want both. Card and grade is going to be your best bet in the long run. And as you go up more and more expensive in price, I think it's more and more important that you get the card and the grade. Now, for me, PSA 10 has always been enough. Like I've never felt a big desire to go for like Black Label or to go for like what are they doing now? Like PSA, you can get like a diamond, whatever that is on it. And people are paying like a lot of extra money for those things. I don't know if they're right or wrong to do that. I feel comfortable enough with the difficulty to grade the rarest, the oldest, most historic, cards in the hobby. I think the pops are low enough in PSA 10, given huge demand, that I feel fine enough with them that I'm not like, we need an even harder grading scale to create value. That's probably where I'm at. Now with the ultra modern, I think like the Moonbryon, like if that card becomes like an all-time great card and continues, like that's a card that in a Black Label could make sense because that's how it creates actual rarity on a card like that. Whereas so many people have PSA 10s, like for that card to ever get to multiple hundreds of thousands or $1 million or something like that. Like if 20, 30 years from now, like that card is like, this was the card of like that 20-year era when all of these kids and everyone loves that card in a Black Label could be up there with some massive cards. Like there is a possibility. Now, would I risk it? Absolutely not. I just want to say that I would not risk it, but I don't think that person's like completely crazy, who are paying whatever they're paying for it now. And I assume they're paying a lot for that. I assume that card's for like 40 grand or 50 grand, I would rather just buy like the low pop PSA 10, first edition, whatever. But, I can see a scenario. So that's what I would say. Like, if you're going to put a lot of money into Pokemon, you got to understand that you're taking a ton of risk, whether it's PSAs, going out of business one day, or PSA losing their credibility and then your graded cards going way down in value, or, whatever it is, the Pokemon card hobby, people being less interested in cards. Like there's just a lot of risk and volatility. And so you have to build that into your asymmetric, that's why you're looking for those 15x's in price to make it worth those large risks. Thoughts on the Logan Paul's Illustrator selling for record price, and if the Black Label Illustrator, I assume the Black Label Illustrator was like an April Fool's joke. Although the first time I saw it, I did not think it was an April Fool's joke. And I was like, how could they possibly do this right after this Illustrator sale? And then I was like, oh, it's April Fool's. It's probably April Fool's joke. But thoughts on Logan Paul's Illustrator selling for record price. Amazing for the hobby. Insane. I don't, like really awesome for all of the articles. It makes so many more people aware of what's going on. I never like shilling. I never like people saying, hey, you should invest in this, you're going to make a lot of money. Like, but I love people. I like more people being here who really like this stuff. And although that stuff does bring in people who like, are probably only in it, let's say, for the money or whatever, I think it also opens up a huge opportunity for tons of people who are going to be like lifelong fans and engage in this and want to have fun and community and want to collect and want to make money and want to build a business. They want all of those things. They're not like, just the type of people that are going to make this like a worse, less fun place to be. So I think it does like way more good than bad. Way, way, way more good. And, as far as like predicting that sale, like, if a silent collector was going to buy that item, someone asked me this, I probably would have said it'll probably sell for like 5, 6, 7, 8 million. But if someone's going to buy it for the publicity and to build a business around it and to build a brand around it and a name around it, like it has so much value from a marketing perspective, and even just it's selling so high, just put so much more value in it. It's like, it's a very hard thing to measure. And, there's a lot of like very rich people who, believe it or not, like $5, $6, $7, $8, $9 million more doesn't really change things so much, which is crazy to think about, but it's true. Money is different to those, to people who get to that level of wealth. Dude, you need to hire a cleaner to clean things up, good sir. Apologies for the messy background. I think it looks worse on screen than it actually is. I genuinely just, like, most of it is organized and in order, and then I have like a pile or two on the ground. It shows the lack of effort I put into things like that. Good to see you back as well. What's your biggest bags? Second to Pokemon, Magic, One Piece. Like, what have I like lost the most money on, or what have I can't say that I've like lost money on things so far, or considerable money on anything that I've like really like speculated on. But again, a lot, majority of that's just due to the continued sort of like boom period and luck in all of that. As soon as we enter a period that isn't like that, of course I will, whatever I was speculating on or buying right before that, I will lose money on in the future. It's inevitable. But I don't know. I mean, I have like MetaZoo cases from the original MetaZoo that I did buy at very, very cheap prices, but those are around the same that they've always been. I would say everything Magic and One Piece and Pokemon is pretty much up. Timmy Gray says, thoughts on buying the modern Chad sets, Ascended, Prismatic, Destined, etc. versus is that poopier sets in higher quantities? Poorer sets, probably poorer sets versus poorer sets, Perfect Order, etc. in higher quantities. More quantity versus more quality. I have no idea. I think it's a total crapshoot. As I said before, you have sometimes the best set, like even if you look back to Team Up, like Team Up was like no one, like when the tag team sets first came out, people didn't like the tag team sets. It was all Burning Shadows, the Burning Shadows Charizard. So if you had bought a bunch of Burning Shadows, when those were more popular than the tag team sets, you would have gotten, that would have been a terrible decision, right? So if you bought the less popular sets that then ended up becoming way more popular down the line, Vivid Voltage versus Evolving Skies, right? When Vivid Voltage came out, it was before Evolving Skies, like what, 6 months before it or 5 months before it, something like that, maybe 8 months before it, I don't know. But similar thing. If you thought Vivid Voltage was the good set and Chilling Rain or something was the bad set, same thing could have happened to you. So, yes, when I look at these sets, I say, my brain says the better sets are Prismatic, Ascended, Destined. I like Dragonite a lot, and I like Gengar. I like the evolutions, and I like Team Rocket. And Perfect Order just seems like meh for like a Gen 1 collector like myself. But I don't really put my opinion too high. So I just don't know. I just don't know what will happen. If it were me and I was forced to like invest, like, okay, if I was doing the plan, the way that I would invest, this is the way that I would invest in modern sealed, and take this with an absolute grain of salt. The way I would invest is I would put in, I'd probably say, okay, I'm going to take $10,000 and I'm going to invest it into every modern set that comes out. And I'm going to buy however much I can buy with $10,000. As long as I can get that, as long as my buy-in price feels competitive, like with the immediate secondary market. Like I don't feel like it's selling for like 3-4 times right out of the gate or something crazy. Okay. And then after 2 years, I'm going to sell it no matter what, or 2.5 years or 3 years, whatever. And whatever the price is, I'm going to sell it, whether it's higher or lower. Then I'm going to take that money and I'm going to keep doing it over and over again. And I'm going to do that for the next 5 years. Like if I was actually going to invest in this stuff, that's what I would do. So my answer would be put the same amount of money in all of them, but you'll just get more of the bad ones than the good ones. The bad ones than the good ones. Now, if you want to like, that would be almost like an index fund investing. Like if you were index stock investing, right? If you want to try to get, if you want to go for higher risk, higher reward, you can try and pick individual stocks or individual boxes. And you can say, well, you know, maybe none of these 4 are good because they're like perfect order really isn't that great. And people are accurately seeing that, but maybe give it 6 more months and there'll be a set that you think is really great that you're like, why don't people like it that much? It's a really good set. There's some really cool cards in it. And then you decide I'm going to go all in on that set. Or a set comes out that's like selling the same as Ascended, Prismatic, and Destined, but you're like, this set's 10 times better. I'm going to go all in on that, you know? Just make sure, I would make sure that I picked a sales point, because I think if you are long-term investing in these items, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you are taking a massive gamble on the relevance of any of these sets, okay? And I think the more time that goes by, the less likely, the less relevant a lot of these items will be, rather than more relevant to people. And with each new generation of Pokemon cards, it will be less likely that it will continue what it's done in the previous generation, because there will be more sets to compete against more sets, and the demand will be you know, theoretically the demand will not continue to grow. Like more and more people will not continue jumping in the hobby. Now, for the next 5 years, that might happen, and it might continue to offset more product, right? The hobby could 5x in demand and only 2x in items, and you know, blah blah blah. Like I have no idea, but eventually, you know, the odds. The longer you do that, the more the odds will stack against you, and inevitably they will get to a point where it's not working anymore. Appreciate all the kind words. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks everyone for hanging out. I mean, 72 people watching live is insane after 3 years of not being on YouTube. I really appreciate it. It's really a testament to like how popular Pokemon cards are, and just Pokemon card chat, and you know, it's awesome. For the Worlds guys, I didn't see any Worlds promo spiking. I won't talk about who, but I didn't see any Worlds promo spiking. I saw the 2004 sample. I didn't do too well on Fnatic. So the ones that have started to spike, if you look on just kind of buy it now, is you're starting to see like 2016s. I saw some sales, and you're starting to see like champion stamps starting to creep back up to like 3, 4, 5,000 for certain years, where they got down to like 1,500 to 1,800. So it really depends on now the stamped 2004 ones that have been selling. Like there have been 3 that have been up. Those are the first ones that have sold in a very long time. And yes, I believe they're all part of the same collection. But in general, Tim, like when I say the prices are starting to go back up, like make sure you like, the prices got down to like you could buy like top 16s for like $200, $300. Now I'm seeing a lot of those cards sell for 600, 700. You know, now will they? You know, and a big part of it is auction versus the buy it now, right? Appreciate that. Ruben Chang says, "Will you be vending at any card shows? Would love to say hi." I will be in Chicago at the end of the month. It's like my first and potentially last show for a while. If you are in Chicago at the Collecticon, please come say hi. It'd be awesome to see people, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've been kind of locked down, you know, with marriage, house, and baby stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. PSA seems to be grading much harsher, doubly so for vintage. I like your thoughts on buying the card, and I think there's an opportunity for fresher, clean vintage designs to look better than most 10s. Yeah, I mean, I certainly, if you're going to buy 9s, getting a clean 9, you know, would be great. What's the best thing to invest in right now? 151. The best things to invest in. So I tend not to give like exactly what I've like speculated or invested in. I more talk about principles. Like I did mention something that like I've invested or speculated a bunch in, like Worlds promos over the last few months because I had some insider info about, why the prices were going down because I think very long term they're very undervalued items because people don't know about them because of their rarity, because of their historical importance, all right. So like I'm always looking for opportunity, and what I said before is like if I was going to invest in like ultra modern and not vintage or niche promos or trophies or that stuff, which is what I would invest in if I was going to hold them for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. What I would invest in would be I would try and pick some new set, maybe that hasn't even come out yet. Do I think 151 will probably go up? I think if the market remains the way it is and does really well for the next like 3 years, like 151, there's some chance that like 151 could double or triple, just like Sun and Moon sets and Scarlet and Violets, or Sword and Shield sets, excuse me, did. But there's no telling it. It may not. I don't know too much about this. I'm not like a massive sealed dealer. So I would more leave it to like people like Rusty TCA Gaming to comment on kind of their thoughts and experiences with it. Best is different for everyone. Yeah, so I think like when we talk about like what is like best tends to get like best, like what does the hobby think is best? It gets defined over long periods of time, right? Narratives get created in the short run, and then they get sort of like, what's the best card in the hobby? Well, the narrative that has been sort of created is like the Illustrator Pikachu, I guess, is the best card or the most expensive card, the most desirable card, I guess, right? I may not believe that. Not everyone may believe that, but the prices show that the wealthiest people or whatever, some amount of people, enough people believe in that card enough or want that card enough that it's been able to achieve those types of prices. Obviously best from a collector perspective is just whatever you like, whatever makes you happy, right? But best from a pricing perspective, is subjective and subjective in that it's very narrative based, but those narratives can shift and change. Like what the best set was, it used to be Hidden Fates was the best set of all time, then, and around the same time, like Evolutions and Hidden Fates, best sets of all time, then once Alt Arts, came out, it was Sword and Shield era, Evolving Skies, best set of all time. Now, I don't know, like, is it 151? Is it Crown Zenith? Is it Evolving Skies? Well, maybe Evolving Skies is the best set, but maybe not for its price. Maybe some of these other things are better. Maybe it's Team Up. Maybe it's Phantom Forces. Maybe it's, I don't know. And then you see some of these vintage box sales. Well, maybe it's Sky Rage. Maybe it's, narratives can shift. Yeah, I think this is one that like it definitely makes me uncomfortable. This one actually scares me the most probably for like long-term value of like high graded cards, because like if this gets really good where you can fix damage and you can make a ton more cards like PSA 9, PSA 10 condition, like that would dramatically decrease the value of my collection, which I would be, it is what it is, so I think there is like now I don't know enough about it. I don't know if that's really ever possible or likely. I don't know how expensive or difficult. It also may be more the type of thing that like it's way easier to do it from like a 5 to a 7 than it would ever be from like an 8 to a 10. And then when you add in, well, they're just not giving out that many 10s anymore. 10s in particular might be really resistant to this just because it's like chipping, I don't know that much about it, but like chipping's impossible to repair. Whereas, surface scratches and dents, you can, I don't know. Let's see. Dan Turner says, but data shows the best sets outperform the poor sets easily, and any true fan can have the good from the bad. So, like, just as I showed you, that actually isn't the case, because the best set was Vivid Voltage at the time, right? The best set was Evolving Skies and Hidden Fates. If you had bought a ton of Hidden Fates, which most people did back then, Hidden Fates did so much worse. You could have bought Hidden Fates at like $200 in ETB, or Evolving Skies at like $95 a box, a booster box, at the same moment in history, right? And at the time, like, Hidden Fates was the best set ever, Evolutions was the best set ever, and Vivid Voltage was the best modern set in that moment, right? You have to be careful of that moment and that narrative. And then once the price soars and the narrative and everyone starts talking, like, it seems like it's obvious, but it's really not. It's really not when you're in it. And the longer you do this, the more you realize that. So I would, I'd just be careful. And as far as like the data shows that, like I can give examples like that where the opposite has been the case. It's all about the snapshot you take, and it's all about which set you decide. So now, is it true that once a set gets to 300 or 400 and it starts to develop that narrative, like, it'll go to a certain amount before it stops? Well, I could show you an example where it didn't. Now, there isn't a lot of price history in general. So you and I, Dan Turner, none of us really know what's going to happen next with any of these sets, because we're all operating on such a small price history window, and we're all operating in these boom periods. So we don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years when we're likely not going to be in a boom period, what all these are going to do. And even in the short run, things were different 2-3 years ago than they are today. So and you're operating, we're making assumptions based on so little data. It's like, well, this happened 3 times before, so it's going to happen again and again and again. And it's just, it doesn't mean you shouldn't, you should give up, or you shouldn't, you could still take a bet, right? And say, well, it happened before, I think it's going to happen again, I lean this way. That still might be the right decision, but I think it's less obvious than I think most people think. I'm not aware of any lawsuits or anything, so I can't comment. Drax says, that's why I buy 2 to 3 booster packs for every set that comes out at the closet entry to MSRP. Been doing it since Chilling Reign. It's been working well without having used my brand. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And since Chilling Reign, Chilling Reign, that got down to like $70, right? Battle Styles and Chilling Reign, like 75 maybe for Chilling Reign, and like 70 for Battle Styles, and then 95 for Evolving Styles, right? Like those have been the best, right? Now, can you buy some of the brand new sets below MSRP? Do you have access to it? Like we have a Play Store, so obviously we get distributor access, but can the average person on the secondary market, like, what happens when the set is $250 or $300 right out the gate? Do you still buy the 2 to 3? I think obviously, I think it's a riskier price point, but how much risky, And then I think there's also just have fun with it. I used to get into these like intense arguments over this. Like, it's okay to just buy a few boxes, throw them in a closet, and hope they go up, because it's fun. And most people who are doing this are buying 2 to 3 boxes. Now, if you are buying thousands of boxes, or you have millions of dollars in card collecting like I do, right? Many, many, many millions of dollars in cards, because you run multiple businesses and you have a large collection, right? It does become a lot more serious and intense. But for most people, the arguments and the debating, it's more for the fun of trying to be right than it is really serious financial risk. Do you think it's worth investing in later sets if the printers print in higher volumes to match demand? Would that money work better in vintage? And I guess the last thing I'll say about this comment is, is this has crushed. Like, doing this has been extremely good, as long as you've been selling, right? 2-3 years, because Some of these boxes then won't move for another year or two. Once they get to a certain point, they'll flatline for a couple of years, and you should have taken that money and put it. It's hard to time, right? It's hard to time. That's the struggle of this. But as far as doing this for the last few years, it's been amazing. But if you had started doing this in 2016, you would have seen no growth for 4 years. So it's possible someone could see this right now and start doing it in 2 years from now, and then see no growth for 5 years. And we could go back to a period where there isn't growth. So it's just understanding that none of it's guaranteed. And it's important to say, just because if you're out there and you're like, I need money for my family and I need to get really rich and this is going to be, the way, I would really suggest building a business in this space and not just putting money in the closet, as a real financial vehicle. And I think the people who have been able to invest and it's been an incredible financial vehicle, including myself, like, have gotten largely quite lucky. Beyond really great skill. Okay. Yeah, and having these, like, let's buy at MSRP, let's buy below this price, like, and then let's actually sell after 2 years. Like, the more you can plan ahead, the better you'll do, because human nature tends to tell us the opposite thing. So, like, when things go up really high, it's like really hard to sell. When things go down, we like tend to panic sell. So having a plan that's like, well, if it go, no matter what, I'm just going to sell at this point. Like, that is often the best way to day trade. Like, really good day traders and momentum investors will tell you that they try and lock in their plans ahead of time, most of them. Unless that, like, massive data has shifted or changed, they try and lock in their strategies so that when the strategy is playing out, they don't like panic and do something against the strategy that they had initially. Appreciate all the positive comments. Really, that's not good. Latest pickups. So a couple of my latest pickups, they're a little bit on the expensive side, but I just picked up a couple of these full art trophy cards. So this one in particular is from the 2015 tournament, which was in Boston, which is where I'm from. I love collecting particularly like 2015 stuff from Boston, from that one. Those are like cool collector items that I've been collecting. Some raw cards, just picked up. I've always loved these. So, like, every time, like, I can get these for like under market, I'm always picking these up. I put them in binders and then I like sell them later. And then that 97 card set in general has always been one of my favorite. I got a lot of cards around me that I've, but so I buy a ton, but the vast majority, unfortunately, goes to my business, and I don't even and goes to like the warehouses we have and or streamers we have. So unfortunately, I don't even get to be surrounded by it anymore. But my wife is very thankful that most of the cards are out of our house. I've been buying a lot of historic cards in bag grades. I'm not going to show them, but I wouldn't be surprised if the guy who buys from me does. Sure. I'm mainly a Japanese collector, and seeing some of these cards spiked up has been nuts. A good example of the Torchic Pokepark PSA at Tele 6K. I got one. Yeah. There's a lot of examples of that. Certainly, Japanese has been kind of the latest thing I've seen really spike. Japanese vintage, niche Japanese cards. A lot of this stuff too. It's Jark and everyone else. A lot of these cards, they haven't sold in a while. So part of it is like, if they had sold maybe 3-4 months ago, we would have already seen them boom. And I don't know about this Pokepark card specifically, if it follows it, but one thing I've been seeing is that, like, like the Fan Club EV or a PSA 10 version of this, Dasuki Club, or, some sort of card that hasn't sold in a while. The last sale might have been 10,000, and then it sells for 40,000, and it's like, whoa, oh my God, So it's interesting, and who's buying that, right? People are buying 4 times the last comp because they want it so badly because there's so much confidence. It's an interesting moment in these items. Are they collectors? Are they resellers? Are they speculate? Like, obviously some combination of all of it, but it's an interesting time in these items. I will say, and this is something that I would have been saying the whole time, like just a PSA for everybody. If you do have low pop vintage stuff, make sure that it's sold recently. Because if you look at last comps and they're like 6 months or a year old, you could be selling for 1/4 the value of what it may sell now. So just be really careful when you're doing your research on when to sell it and how much to sell it for. Because I've been seeing this happen a lot where people are just way underselling their cards to resellers, which happens, and then the reseller takes it and they pay 95% on it because you have it 1/4 the value. That if you threw it up and if you gave it to James at Z&G and auctioned it off, you would get in an auction based on private sales and things that you may not know of that person knows of. There's also people who like buy up a lot of those cards and then sell them in private sales and then go out and buy more of them. So it's just kind of a tricky, like, it's nothing illegal about it, but it's just like a tricky way of not setting that new higher comp, keeping that comp private. The comp game. So if you have very valuable cards, take your time. Take your time. And auctioning them off in a very public setting with a lot of, where a lot of resellers may want to buy it and a lot of collectors can be a really good option, because then you have a ton of eyes on it and just let the market, bid it to where it's at. So I don't know, because I'm really not like in the YouTube scene or online too much anymore. I don't know exactly like what the narrative is these days. You could tell me, but I don't know of any huge shift. Like, obviously the whole Chinese market, Chinese is very popular, and the Chinese sort of exclusive arts and sets have been good. I don't know if you have anything specific in mind. I just haven't sold anything since 2020. It's been working really well so far. Genius. Don't overthink it. Do you find when you have the money to basically buy whatever grail you want, it takes some of the fun out of it, or is all the fun in the hunt for it? So to me, they're just cards at the end of the day. So I try and not take any of it too seriously. So the fun of like making money off of other cards I bought and then putting them into other cards and growing it over time will only be satisfying. And I don't mean to like sound too like whatever here, but like Sarah and I need to make enough that we can like give to charity, that we can grow the rest of our lifestyle so that our family's taken care of, that we have money to build hopefully nonprofits in the future and do charitable things. My collection wouldn't feel good to me unless it's like all of that goes into like affording my collection. So it's fun as long as I'm not overspending, really, to answer your question a little bit of a different way. But the fun is not like it's just cardboard. Me buying those cards, like, it was fun. There was a high to it. But like the high of like giving to charity and helping a family out in need, or helping your fellow man, or having a family and a kid and being able to like afford a lifestyle and take care of them is going to bring you way more meaning. And probably even more importantly, it's just way more altruistic. It's like, it's better ethics. So I know some people love when I get into the philosophy, some people not so much, but like to answer that question honestly, that's my mindset around this stuff. So it's all fun. It's fun buying really cheap cards. It's fun buying really expensive cards. It's fun. The hunt is fun. All of that's fun, but none of it's ever going to be like that fun. Like it's never going to be super meaningful to collect cards. And I think when you realize that you can let go, you can have fun with it and not seek things in it that you're not going to be able to find. I also think a lot of problems can come from when you're looking for something in needs that they can't provide you, which of course we all do. It's extremely human. So I think I made an addiction video on that at one point on my channel. So being like, I felt addicted to cards. I felt addicted to buying, right? Addicted to the high of just a new package coming to my house, right? For those who don't know, I was a therapist for like 10 years and did a lot of like addiction work. So like these things can be very addicting, like, super normal. I think thinking of it that way and setting those limits and understanding that is how to, everything is about sustaining it and enjoying it over long periods of time, while also like improving other aspects of your life and areas of your life, not letting it diminish those things. Very cool. Very, very cool. I know you collect DVC score, but I can't recall if you collect Yu-Gi-Oh. So have you seen the recent boom in Yu-Gi-Oh? Yeah, so I do. I was lucky enough to buy sort of all of the grails over the last few years. And I have noticed the spike. I would say like the spike in some cases seems like pretty close to Pokemon. Probably not as crazy, but like it's gone up quite a bit. I use the unpaid promotion here. I use like the collector app these days just to have like just a very quick kind of snapshot of sort of prices and price movement. And like I put all my Yu-Gi-Oh in there, for example, and that's how I realized that, because I don't actually deal in it enough. Appreciate it, Steve and Collector Kid. Appreciate all the positive words. My theory is that modern investing is a house of cards, and Sword Shield stagnating for the last 8 months is the first sign of cracks. Modern investment became mainstream post 2021, and it's the first time. Could be. I do think that it is unsustainable. So in the sense that as more and more sets come out, it's not like every set from every era is going to be able to reach the $2,500 or $5,000. They're not going to just be able to all keep going up forever. So I think people with that attitude and mindset are going to be proven wrong, over time. But people who are buying, new popular things and then flipping them into the market a couple years later, and or buying them low and holding them indefinitely and then just selling them at some higher price, like that could sustain for quite a while. I hope it does, because if it does sustain for a long time, it just means the overall hobby is in a really good place. Can you think of something else where the inherent cost of the product has never changed, but the value has gone up as much as cards? Can you think of something where the inherent cost of the product has never changed? So you just mean like other collectibles? So like fine art? You could buy a Monet from Monet for whatever, $1, and now it's whatever it is, so. I think collectibles in general, if you mean by inherent, you mean it doesn't produce anything. There are certainly historical examples of items that at one point, had little to no value, and eventually human beings decided it was worth, had massive value, extreme value. Do you think that modern, for example, I think in the next, do you agree to an extent? Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this in my Patreon quite a bit, like trying to figure out the math of like how many more people need to come in the hobby to sort of like keep sustaining these prices. All that being said, we're at all-time highs right now. So, could we be at all-time highs again in 3 years from now? We could. So I don't want to sit here and tell people that the next couple generations, we can't see $800,000 brand new modern booster boxes, because we could, now could it also retreat back? Absolutely. Now, every new era that has that, and the higher it goes up, the more likely it's going to collapse under the weight of it. But what will it collapse back to? Will it collapse back to where we're at right now? Will it collapse back to where we were a few years ago? Will it collapse back to 2016? We just don't know. Again, we could still be super early. Like, there could be 3 generations of collectors and people super engaged in the hobby. Now, do I think we're very likely going to run into a down period at some point, in the next 10 years before 3 generations of collectors are fully in the hobby? Probably. It would be unprecedented for this continued growth and continued run when you compare it to sports cards or comic books, who had those long kind of stagnating periods. But just because those stagnated doesn't mean this will stagnate, or as much or the same way. But if I were to place money, I would place money on some stagnation at some point. But, it's tough. Obviously, Pilots, like, I think this type of argument, like, I've never made the argument that, like, this was going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Like, my argument has always been, like, there is a decent enough chance that this is going to happen. And if you take a long enough time horizon, like you're taking 10 years, it becomes a higher and higher chance that will happen at some point during that period. And because of that, I wouldn't invest in any of these things long term. And my real worry, Pilos, is that 15, 20, 30 years down the line, some of these sets over the next 10, 15 years are going to be less relevant than they are when they first come out. Like that we've really seen, and Pokemon may do things. I mean, Pokemon may do serialized cards. Pokemon may do collector sets, like, shorter print, rarer sets, even if they're not serialized. Like, they may do all sorts of things that may grab a lot of the attention and the collector attention away from any of the sets that are really popular right now, any of the modern sets, or sets that come out in 5, 10 years from now. So, but everyone is speculating. Everyone here is speculating. Everyone here is guessing. So I think, humility is the key. Makes me think of that book, Famine, Affluence, and Morality. After having kids, nothing has ever beat that feeling. That's awesome. If you had to pick 3 sets from 2020 and 3 sets from before, and you would only be able to choose from them, which would they be? From 2020 specifically? Gosh, I'm terrible. I mean, I could pick 3, from 2020 until now. Gosh, when was 2020? So that would have been after, really. So really, we're talking Scarlet and Violet. Okay, if price was not a thing and just sets that I think are cool, Evolving Skies is a really great set. I also love the Dragonite V. I'm a big Dragonite collector. What else did I really like from Scarlet and Violet? I think Lost Origin's cool. I think 151's fun. I think Crown Zenith is a really great set. Those are probably like 4 that come out that pop into my head kind of first, of just sets that I've liked quite a bit. That I enjoyed opening, that I enjoyed watching openings of more than other sets. I like some of the brand new sets too, though. I like Ascended Heroes, again, Dragonite. Phantasmal Flames I thought was fun. Destin Rivals, I liked Destin Rivals. I thought the Moltres was really beautiful and the Garchomp was cool. And then older sets, EX Team Rocket Returns is always great. Skyridge is always great. Probably the 97 Cardass set I love. The Ken Sugimori art. I like Versus Series. I don't know. There's a lot of sets that pop into my head. What would be your number 1 Grail option at this point? The 97 Pikachu cards? Yeah, I mean, I think those cards are probably. So just a time check. Really appreciate everyone hanging on. I'm going to try and keep this for 2 hours. So we've got about 17 minutes. So I'm going to try and, I think we're not too far from the bottom of chat. So I think we've actually been, it's been like, there've been great questions all night. I really appreciate everyone hanging out. You know, if you've enjoyed it, definitely take a moment to subscribe. I'm going to continue making videos and getting back into the conversation and engaging, because I have missed it. And, you know, and I do want to meet new people now and meet people who are in the hobby now. There's so many people now in the hobby that weren't when I was making videos 3 years ago. Let's see. Sorry, I was reading. Yeah, I would say that probably that card I would consider to be the, you know, the grail of the hobby if I were forced to pick one. My feeling, of course, an objective is that other languages are getting more attention on YouTube. Vendors seem to be adding Korean, Chinese, and other languages in the case of sell. As such, I do not know if people are ignoring the language because the artwork are trying to create a narrative of a low pop. I feel like many of us could be used. Well, I definitely think vendors are always going to look for opportunities. So like when there isn't enough English and Japanese to go around and they can get, you know, Chinese and Korean copies of the same art, you know, at a much cheaper price and sell them, you know, and still make money. I think, you know, that's a reason why they're going to be around. And I think collectors like them because they're, you know, they're the same art and can buy them much cheaper. I think that's always been why collectors in the West have, you know, the majority of collectors in the West, unless they speak Chinese and Korean, have gone after Chinese and Korean cards, for example. You know, there might also be like more just people who like Chinese and Korean cards, or it just matters less to them. But I would guess it's more of the same that we've seen. I think the overall population of TCG collectors going up has contributed to the market's health. 8 million new faces wanting to collect does things to markets and demand. Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, people talk a lot about vintage right now and, you know, and the vintage prices, or people that I guess are doing this full time and sort of are, you know, have lots of money in this and are engaged in this. But, you know, the fact that those modern booster boxes, like, I think someone said it was like 500 and something, 550, but like your Destined Rivals is selling for 550. Like, if that doesn't show you insane strength in Pokemon, in just terms of the number of people who are interested in it and the demand on the ultra modern. I mean, demand on ultra modern is always going to be, you know, where I'm going to look first for health, sort of active consumer health of the market. Now, active consumer health of the market is what's most important for my businesses, but it's not what's most important for like long-term investing and collecting. And the two are a bit separate. And I think they get confused or conflated sometimes, at least back when I was on YouTube. It's very healthy right now. It's a very exciting time, and all of us should be very happy and feel very fortunate and lucky. And it's fun. It's really fun, you know, and for those, if anyone's feeling negative about it, like, it's fun to be here with other people. Like, the reason, you know, a huge part of why this is fun is that there's so many people here, other people like yourselves who are interested in this. And that's awesome. So don't ever get too frustrated by the drama or by the negativity that you lose sight of, like, it's just fun being a part of something with other people. And that's what we're doing, like, literally. So, you know, enjoy the demand, enjoy the engagement, enjoy the people while you can. Thoughts on the rise in PSA grading in Japan and most Japanese shop now having slabs? What's the long-term effect this has on the market? I don't know. I'm not super engaged in that, to be honest. So I don't know. It's a great question. I'm really not sure. Apologies. I just don't have a good answer for you. Would you be selling big gainers currently? So I am not currently, because my businesses are making enough money and selling enough, and I enjoy collecting enough. So for me personally, I am not, because of my situation, but it doesn't mean if I were in your situation, I would do the exact same thing. So I think that if the money if you can put the money into your business or into some sort of life-changing thing, of course you should you should always be thinking seriously about that. But you know, it's not an easy decision, and depending on what those big gainers are, you know, they may continue to go up quite a bit before they come down. And so, you know, it's always a risk. Favorite Dragonite card? That's going to be tough. That's going to be really tough. I like like the which set is it from? The Delta Dragonite EX, but not the one that's like a grass energy. Legend. What set is that? I can't even think of the set right now. I always have really liked that card. What else do I like? I mean, I like the Fossil Dragonite. What else? Is it Dragon Frontiers? Not there's like the white one and then the green one. I like the green one. The white one's cool too, but I like that. Yeah, Dragonite Game Boy promo is definitely a beautiful card. I don't really think like Dragonite has gotten nearly as much love as I wanted to. Expedition Dragonite is definitely a cool one. That card has had a massive sale recently in a PSA 10. That's a great card. Just the regular holo. I like the Dragonites from Versus series. I don't love them though. I wish they got holo treatment, one of them. But they're two from that. The Game Boy is a good one. The Trainer Volume one, I think that one's cool. The Trainer Volume Dragonite's cool. Dark Dragonite Fossil's always good. I'm basically just naming all the Dragonites. Let's see. So I'm getting close to the bottom. If there are any more questions, please let me know. We're 9 minutes away from my first goal of doing this first video. Pokemon has learned from their experiences in the 2016 boom and 2021 boom. Yes, I think we will get that lull in demand similar to other ended booms, but when, who knows? Is the museum still a goal? Catching up on the stream. Also, I'm also probably first child. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Is the museum still a goal? Definitely. Definitely still a goal. So like my goal has been like, I want to build companies in all the different spaces. Like, so we're doing streaming, we're doing physical stores, we're doing conventions. We're going to start doing conventions. We're doing physical like repack products. We're doing what else are we doing? And eventually I want to do a museum and sort of like a warehouse style museum where you can come experience a lot of this stuff and also see like all of the cool cards in the hobby. Obviously, with the expense of these things, the security is going to be, there's going to be issues and these types of things, but being involved in historic sort of documentation and appreciation, that's the end goal, right? So like, when you focus on the money stuff in part so that you can then invest in the meaning stuff. And the money beyond paying for your sort of, physiological needs is only valuable if you can then take that money and invest it in the meaningful experiences. Right. And so I'd like to, do that, be involved. Like, I thought it was really cool that they did that. Like, I wasn't able to go, but they did that like Hall of Fame thing. I don't know if any of you guys went to the Hall of Fame, like TCG Hall of Fame, but like stuff like that, I think is really good for the hobby. Just like appreciating people who have done a lot for the hobby and talking about that and beginning to like document that. I think creating experiences for average collectors to know that like the hobby really cares about collecting. So like the collector event that was done in Hartford years ago, like bringing old collectors and people who are really passionate about this with new collectors and people who want to be engage. Like creating events and spaces where those people can engage, I think is awesome. Obviously, when I first started doing this and knew nothing, it was the SM Pratts, the TCA Gamings, the Gem and Pokemons. Like they were the ones who had YouTube channels, and Scott, and DJ Gigabyte, and those guys being involved in the creating and the maintaining of E4, and creating a community for people like me, is awesome. And so, yeah, being involved in projects like that are definitely the long-term goal. I appreciate that. I'm gonna try and like do weeklies probably. Like I'm gonna be active. I at least that's my plan right now. I'm gonna try. Like, am I gonna go through hiatuses again? Like maybe, but and I don't know if I want to do I want to do it to a point where I feel like I'm enjoying what I'm talking about and not just repeating the same things over and over again. So we'll see what that balance looks like. But yes, 3 years was a long time, or 2 years, however long it's been. Absolutely. Yeah. And like, the thing is like, you don't have to open packs. You can buy singles. You can buy, like, there's so many cheap, cool looking cards. So going to a local show, with your kids and buying them some dollar cards. You don't need to gamble on packs to have fun. Or some, honestly, affordable repack products where you get 80% of your value or 90% of your value versus opening a Pokemon pack where you get, destroyed. Like there are ways to engage and enjoy the hobby that are free or low cost, involve other people, etc. Yeah, there's the Prism Dragonite, which is really cool. Definitely one of my favorites. Is there a Dragonite card you don't have? Interesting. I'm not sure. Not that it's like that I can think of. I can't think of any like super rare ones. But there probably are, and I just am, unaware. Are you bullish on English Pokemon distribution access long term? I don't know too much. Like, so for those who don't know, like Mason and I are partners. So we're business partners in Cardinal Gaming. So I've learned about distribution through there. He'd be a better person to ask on what he thinks about distribution. I don't know too much about it, honestly. I know it's still very competitive right now, like increasing your distribution, like, if you don't have a physical store, if you're not moving a lot of merchandise, if you're not willing to buy a lot of non-Pokemon stuff, like it's definitely still competitive. If a lot of businesses go out of business, if a lot of streamers go out of business, if a lot of small, mostly online businesses go out of business and it becomes mostly like the Play stores again that are buying Pokemon, I think you'll definitely, it'll be easy to get English distribution for sure. But will that happen? I don't know. The museum only, so like, it's definitely like not like, it's one of my long-term goals, like my long-term goal of like having the biggest collection, my long-term goal of like opening up a museum and doing that project with like other friends, other people who are passionate in the space. I always liked the idea of combining like a big store amusement-y park experience with, themed Pokemon place with museum aspects, like all in one. So I would love to create more physical experiences. I think physical experiences are very valuable even in this very digital world. So I think creating really cool, like I just went to Universal for a friend's like bachelor party a week ago, and creating physical experiences around pop culture stuff like is so cool. Creating like immersive Pokemon, and again, I don't know how, the legality of some of that stuff and, what I'd be allowed to do and not allowed to do with the Pokemon, themes and franchise. But I'd be very interested in creating that and being involved in that. Would it have descriptions? So the truth is, like, I don't know. I don't know. I would be open to lots of different things. It definitely could. It absolutely could. I think having elements to the museum that are very you know easy, not dense, very immersive and experiential, and not you know hitting you with the head of it, in the head with information. And then there could be other areas that are very information dense, and for people who really want to learn a lot of facts and learn a lot about the artists, learn a lot about the Pokemon, the cards. So it's possible that that I may make like a high quality video of some of my collection, or a decent part of my collection at some point. I'm on the fence about it. I also like that people don't know what I have and don't know how much I have. And I do always have some anxiety, and have always had anxiety around like security, and like security for the cards, but also just like security for my family. I do keep like most of my expensive cards like not with me the majority of the time, but um now it's like so much has gotten so expensive that it's like a challenge to do that and like still be able to look at your collection and engage with your collection, which I want to do. So that's honestly the reason I've like always been hesitant or like pretty anxious about showing and talking about it. I would say like the last 5 years, like there certainly have been some flows like that, but overall, it's been like the real money has been made and lost in these just like massive ups and downs that have not been particularly seasonal. Like we're talking 5, 10, 15, 20 X's in the matter of 3, 4 months. AUIP, yeah, I really would have liked to go to that, particularly because like I really like all the people who were inducted, and I just would have been like, I was very curious about it, and about the experience. But I definitely had FOMO for that. Unfortunately, it was like very far, and I'm on very limited travel right now because of baby and family obligations. But all right, we are at 2 hours. Really appreciate everyone hanging out. And yeah, it's been fun being back. It's been fun seeing a lot of names. And it's been awesome that we've had 60, 80 people in here the whole time. And I really enjoy talking with other Pokemon collectors. So it's been really fun. Yeah, please subscribe for more. If you want more of Dan and I, we have a Patreon link. We appreciate everyone's just continued support there. And yeah, if you want to support my businesses, Cardinal Gaming, our stores and online on eBay Live, and we have a lot of products there. And if you ever want to sell to us, we're always buying. But now that I got all that stuff out of the way, appreciate everyone hanging out. It means a lot. And I will catch you guys hopefully like not too long from now. I'm going to try and do these pretty regularly. So, all right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.